Okay, Erev Tov.
Erev Tov.
So, as we were saying, 2 weeks ago, we went through this whole series of prophets about how perfect and amazing and miraculous and wondrous the redemption is. And the reason I went through all that was to claim that sometimes people's attitudes towards the reality that we live in, towards the state of Israel, amongst other things, is formed in comparison to that redemption which we don't have. Meaning this miraculous, wondrous redemption where everything, all of people's ailments are healed, and the what's the pasuk in Yeshayahu, the wolf lies with the lamb, and all these beautiful prophecies of a different world and water coming out of Yerushalayim and all these different things that we saw. People are expecting that redemption, and when that's not happening, we don't see that. It's just a normal state with streets and police and thieves and everything that a normal state has, and they think, okay, it's better than Galut, but this isn't redemption. This is not what the Tanakh was talking about. So I think the beautiful, wondrous, amazing descriptions of Geulah, there is an aspect of them that they cause, it's kind of a demoralization. When we have good things, but they're a far cry from that wondrous, supernatural redemption. So I would like to discuss today the meaning of those amazing, wondrous, supernatural descriptions in the prophets. I'm going to do that through a few sources, and I'm going to share screen. 1 minute. I have to make sure I have the right screen to share. Here we are. No, not that one. Yes, that one. Here it comes. Okay. There we are. Okay. Gemara in Masechet Brachot says the following. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, all the prophets prophesied only for the days of the Mashiach, but as for the world to come, I have not seen, O God, beside thee. Meaning, all the prophecies of the prophets are about redemption in this world, but the world to come, what we call in Hebrew, Olam Haba, no human being can say anything about Olam Haba. Olam Haba, no one but God has anything to say, has any comprehension about what is Olam Haba. So this statement is differentiating, is making a very clear boundary between Mashiach, Yemot HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach, and Olam Haba. But the Gemara continues and says the following. These rabbis differ from Shmuel. For Shmuel said, there is no difference between this world and the days of the Mashiach, except that in the latter, in the time of the Mashiach, there will be no bondage of foreign powers. In Hebrew, it's called En ben ha'olam hazeh le'imot HaMashiach. There's no difference between this world.
Ela shi'abud malchuyot.
Ela shi'abud malchuyot. The bondage of foreign powers. As it says in Sefer Dvarim, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. Even when we keep all of the Torah and everything is in place and it's Yemot HaMashiach, there will be poor people and we will have the laws of tzedakah. There will be rich and there will be poor, meaning the world is not going to be miraculously redeemed with everybody being rich and everything is good. It's going to be a world very much like the world that we are familiar with. You're going to have to go to work and some people will make a better living than others and so on. And we will not be under bondage of any foreign powers. So the main character or the main characteristic of redemption, of Mashiach, says Shmuel, is that Am Yisrael is free. We are an independent nation, not under the bondage of any foreign power. But these amazing descriptions of the rabbis, basically what Shmuel is saying, why does it disagree with what Rabbi Yochanan said? Because Shmuel is saying, no, the amazing, powerful, wondrous descriptions are not about Olam Haba, are not about Yemot HaMashiach, they are about Olam Haba. But Yemot HaMashiach is just a regular world like this one. Just that we're not under the bondage of foreign powers. So there's a disagreement here that goes throughout the generations. These are two Amoraim in the 3rd century, Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel. By the way, Rabbi Yochanan is in Eretz Yisrael, Shmuel is in Bavel, and they disagree what will happen in the time of Mashiach. Rabbi Yochanan is saying these amazing, wondrous prophecies are about Mashiach, and Shmuel is saying no, they're not. They're about something else, something beyond this world, Olam Haba. In this world, Yemot HaMashiach is the same reality as the one that we know today, just that Am Yisrael will be independent, will not be under bondage of any foreign powers. If we take what Shmuel says, basically we are Yemot HaMashiach. We are not under the bondage of foreign powers unless you say that the American government can always make frown on us or be nice to us, but we're not under the bondage of foreign powers. Or maybe we're not as under the bondage of foreign powers. I mean, in times of history where we were totally under the rule of the Babylonians, of the Greeks, of the Persians, of the Romans. So we were always under another foreign power. And today we are independent. And the reason why I think this is important is because, once again, what do we think of those wondrous descriptions of Yemot HaMashiach? If we follow Shmuel, then we do not expect Yemot HaMashiach to look like that. Those wondrous descriptions are about something which is beyond this world. In this world, we expect that we have to deal with everything like all times in history, but we are free of bondage of foreign powers. We are in our own hands, and we have to take responsibility for ourselves, for the Jewish kingdom, for the Jewish state, whatever it will be. So this is a very, very important disagreement, difference, machloket. What do we expect to happen in Yemot HaMashiach? I want to continue this idea, this machloket, with the Rambam. And I will say in advance, the Rambam will bring a differing view. He will at least mention that there is a differing view. One person who I can quote as differing with the Rambam is the Ramban. The only difference between them is that Rambam ends with a mem because his father's name was Moshe, and Ramban ends with a nun because his father's name was Nachman. And they lived a little bit parallel. Ramban is younger than the Rambam. If the Rambam passed away in 1204, if I have it right, and Ramban lived till about 1250. So they're almost at the same time, but Ramban is like a generation or a generation and a half or two after the Rambam. Maybe the Ramban was a child when the Rambam was an old man. When people who are not familiar with the details hear Ramban, they get confused who's who. But right now, what we need to know is Ramban accepts the wondrous descriptions as reality that is going to happen in the time of Mashiach. Ramban expects, for instance, that it says in Vayikra that animals will not cause damage to people. And he says that the reason why animals damage people is because of the sin of Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. And in the time of Mashiach, we will repent and we will correct that mistake, and we will bring the world back to Gan Eden, and animals will no longer cause harm to human beings. We don't have to be afraid of fierce animals, and he understands that as something literal. Rambam doesn't understand it that way, and let's see. This is from Maimonides' Code of Law, called in Hebrew Mishneh Torah or Hayad HaChazakah. It has 14 different topics. It's the whole code of Jewish law. It's separated into Yud Daled, Hayad HaChazakah, Yud Daled, 14 different areas, and each area is divided into like 5 different, detailed, specific areas of Jewish law. And each one has 20, 30 chapters, and each chapter has 10, 15, 20 detailed rules. And this chapter chapter 12 in Mishneh Torah, it's called the book of Shoftim, and the laws of Melachim u'Milchamot, kings and wars. Chapter 12 is the very last chapter of the whole book of Mishneh Torah. So the Mishneh Torah starts with the foundation of foundations is the belief in God, one God, and so on. And this is the end of it, is Mashiach, meaning the Rambam is kind of projecting a message. If you follow the whole Torah from A to Z, that will bring us to redemption, to Mashiach. And here says the Rambam the following. I am reading from rule number 1 in chapter 12. Do not presume that in the Messianic age any facet of the world's nature will change or there will be innovations in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern, same pattern that we have been familiar with as far as anybody can study history going back. Although Isaiah states the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat, these words, says the Rambam, are a metaphor and a parable. Then the prophet never meant this literally. The interpretation of the prophecy is as follows. Israel will dwell securely together with the wicked Gentiles, or likened to a wolf and a leopard. So Israel, I'm stopping the reading right now and explaining. Israel is the lamb, so to speak. The wolf or leopard are powerful, wicked nations who would be cruel towards nations that were weaker than them, such as the Jewish nation or other people. I don't like being the lamb, but I was born after the establishment of the state of Israel, when there were Israeli soldiers. For thousands of years, Jews were very weak. That's been true for a long time. So it's not unusual that Israel will be compared, or will be a parable. The parable of Israel will be the lamb, and the parable of the strong, wicked nations will be the wolf or the leopard. And Rambam says Israel will dwell securely with the wicked Gentiles. They will no longer hurt Am Yisrael. We will live in the world as a free nation. Nobody will put us under any kind of what did the Rambam call it? Of subordination or anything like that. And we will be free, and we will live together with other nations in the world. They will all return, says the Rambam, to the true faith. How come the leopard and the lamb, the parable, are going to stop being wicked towards Am Yisrael? Because they will return to the true faith that's mentioned there in the parak, in the chapter in Isaiah, and no longer steal or destroy. Rather, they will eat permitted food at peace with Israel. As Isaiah states, the lion will eat straw like an ox. Meaning the lion will eat straw is saying the lion will no longer be interested in attacking and eating and killing and eating any other animal, because he's looking for straw just like everybody else. So first of all, everybody's vegetarian. You can put that in parentheses if you want to. But the main point is that everybody is eating equally. Nobody needs to hurt the other one, to attack, to kill, to eat the other one. Everybody will eat the same thing together at peace. So the parable of Isaiah, says the Rambam, is peace. That's the idea of the prophecy of the wolf will dwell with the lamb. It's nothing in nature changes. It doesn't mean that animals are going to stop eating animals. That's going to continue just as animals do. But it's a parable that human beings, nations, will live in peace with one another. One of my rabbis once said, I'm not sure which is a greater, more unusual miracle, that animals will stop eating one another, or that people will live in peace with one another. But the Rambam understands this to be a metaphor to peace between nations. The Rambam continues, similarly, other messianic prophecies of this nature are metaphors. Let's think of a few of them. So if in Sefer Vayikra, the Torah says that animals will no longer attack people, maybe it means like the world we have today. It's not that nature has changed. The wild animals are in certain areas of the world where people live. We don't have wild animals, so they don't attack us. Ailment, said Isaiah 35, everybody's ailments will be cured, maybe it means that medicine will be, preventive medicine will be so good people won't become ill, or that people's mental illnesses will be cured because of the abilities of medicine, with the blessing of God, with the guidance, with the help of God, from the hand of God. Zechariah, we saw last week, speaks about nighttime comes and there's light during the day. Doesn't mean there will be no day and night. It means that the world will be good, will be positive, will be secure, will be happy. And water coming out of Yerushalayim means that a good blessing to the world will come from Jerusalem for all nations, for all people. Very nice, but these are all parables. So I gave examples of parables and what they mean. And the Rambam says, in the Messianic era, everyone will realize which matters were implied by these metaphors and which allusions they contained. So we don't necessarily understand. I gave a few examples of possible interpretations. You may interpret them differently. We don't know what exactly these metaphors mean. What are they alluding to? But when the Messianic era comes, then we will realize and understand what these metaphors were implying. Rambam continues, our sages taught, there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. What is not accurate, or what criticism would you have of the Rambam when he says this last statement, the beginning of rule number 2?
Well, we're clearly not there yet.
Subjugation? You're talking about the words subjugation? Subjugation?
No. Not about a specific word.
Oh,
The whole idea that
I'm confused. I'm really confused. There have been, I mean, we're a sovereign nation now, right? We're independent and as free as a sovereign nation can be, small sovereign nation can be. But this is historically not the first time that that's been the case. Does that mean in times gone by, when there was a previous era of Jewish sovereignty in this country, does that mean that that was also equivalent to the times of Mashiach?
That's a very good question, Mark. I'd just like to put that on the side for a moment. I want to make a certain point here about the Rambam, then we'll get back to your question, okay?
Okay.
Again, what did we see in the Gemara in Brachot? Did the Gemara in Brachot, does the Gemara support what the Rambam says? Our sages taught. My criticism is about the words our sages taught. I'll go back to the Gemara. Here it is. Did our sages teach what the Rambam says they taught?
One sage, yes, perhaps the other sages, no.
Absolutely, exactly. How can the Rambam say our sages taught? You can say the rabbis differ in their opinions. I, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, support one of the opinions. How can you say our sages taught? If people don't know better, they think that all the rabbis said something. I have this criticism of general quotes of the rabbis that people say, the rabbis said a lot of things, and some said A and some said B, and they disagree with one another a lot. Sometimes you're quoting something that appears in a source, in the Talmud, in the Midrash. You say, the rabbi said, there was a rabbi who said that, but it's not so easy to say our sages taught. So the Rambam is taking a side, and he's saying, I am siding with Shmuel. There is no difference, there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. Okay, but the Rambam, now I have to be fair with the Rambam, because he doesn't stop here, he continues. Let's see how he continues. The simple interpretation of the prophet's words appear to imply that he says something about what comes first, the war, the great war called Gog Magog, or Eliyahu Navi coming. There are some sages who say that Eliyahu will come before Gog Magog. He's getting into the details of what will happen in the time of Mashiach. And then he says the following over here. All these and similar matters cannot be definitely known by man until they occur. When will we know in this disagreement between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel what will happen in the time of Mashiach? When will we know who was right?
It happens.
When it happens. We
Right.
can't know until they occur. For these matters are undefined in the prophet's words, and even the wise men have no established tradition regarding these matters, except their own interpretation of the verses.
Right.
Therefore, there's a controversy among them regarding these matters. So I take back my criticism of the Rambam. He made a statement at the opening of this rule number 2, but then he balances it and says, I'm saying my opinion, but I want you to know that there are different interpretations of the Tanakh, because there's no tradition, and it can be interpreted in different ways, and therefore different wise men interpret it in different ways. So there's a controversy, and we will not know who's right until it happens. So I am stating my opinion. I agree with Shmuel. I think that the Messianic era will be the same as this, the natural world that we know. And the difference will be that we will be emancipated from being subjugated to any Gentile kingdom. But I don't know for sure. And when will we know? We will only know when it occurs. And then he goes on to say, regardless of the debate concerning these questions, neither the order of the occurrence of the events or their precise detail are among the fundamental principles of the faith. You know what? If you go to a community and you support the Rambam, that the only difference in the time of Mashiach will be that we will be an independent nation. And the guy sitting next to you in shul says, what? The prophets say, Ramban said that it means literally what it said, and you're arguing about it. Neither one of you has to point to the other one and say, you are a heretic. You don't have to do that. This is an old disagreement, an old controversy, starting at the time of the Gemara. So you also have this disagreement. Why don't you just agree to say, you know what, when it comes, we'll see who was right. So, and it's not fundamental. It's not like, does Judaism have commandments that you have to follow? One says yes, one says no. If you say no, that's not Judaism. Judaism has commandments that you have to follow. But yeah, and one of the fundamental principles of Judaism is redemption. We strive, we believe in a time where things will be good, and we will never rest until we bring this time to the world. But will it be exactly this way, A, or exactly that way, B? That is not a fundamental principle of faith. And a person should not occupy himself with that. And also, he says, not try to determine the appointed time for Mashiach's coming. So why do I bring this back to the bigger picture? Why am I bringing this? Because what I'm trying to say is all those prophets that we saw last time are describing something wondrous. If you expect, like Rabbi Yochanan, that these are things that are going to literally happen in the time of Mashiach. So you look around today and you say, this is a far cry from what we were waiting for. This is disappointing. I'm gonna live in Israel because it's better than other places, or I won't because it's not worth it. But it's disappointing. If you understand like Shmuel and like the Rambam, you're going to say, wow, this, I'm being careful, Mark, this has never happened before, but it hasn't happened in 2,000 years. And this is powerful. This is amazing. We are very strong. Were we this strong in the time of King Solomon? I'm thinking of times when Am Yisrael was an independent kingdom in the land of Israel. After Yetziat Mitzrayim, certainly not in the beginning. We were trying to settle in the land and become an independent nation. It took hundreds of years. We had all these wars with the nations around us, maybe for a short period of time in the time of King Solomon. And, they talk about the 75 years or so, that it was the time of Shlomo, David and Shlomo, maybe 33 years in the time of David, 40 years in the time of Shlomo, 2 more years with Shlomo's son, and that was it. And then it was split. That's the first 75. Then we have in the time of the Chashmonaim, and again, it didn't last. And then the Romans took over after we became independent from the Greeks. Then the Romans took over, but there was a period there where we were independent. The Rambam says more than 200 years. I'm not sure exactly what that relates to. And here we have what's called the third, Shivat Zion Hashlishit, the third time that Am Yisrael comes to Eretz Yisrael, it's the only time that Am Yisrael is gathered from the exiles. Because Beit Rishon, the first time, the kingdom of David HaMelech, was the continuation of Yetziat Mitzrayim before there was Galut. The
Right.
second time, the building of the second temple was not a gathering of the exiles. As long as it existed for hundreds of years, it remained a minority of Jews in this kingdom when it was independent, and it was not when it was independent, and it was not independent. And for the first time in history, the prophecies about gathering of exiles are being realized, and we are an independent Jewish state. Relating to your question, Mark, great question. I think that what the rabbis would say, again, I'm quoting the rabbis, I think what some rabbis would say is that it's always a potential, it's always an opportunity. And it was an opportunity in the time of Shlomo. And some rabbis say that one of Shlomo's great grandsons, a few hundred years after him, King Chizkiyahu, in the time of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, was potential of Mashiach. It could have happened then. And Hashem made a miracle, and the Assyrian army collapsed at the outside the walls of Jerusalem, and that could have been redemption, and they didn't seize the opportunity. And maybe the second temple was such an opportunity. I know of other sources that say the second temple was never had that potential. It was just a kind of breathing, it's like, you go underwater, you take a big gulp of air before you go down under the water. It's like Am Yisrael going underwater for 2,000 years, taking a big gulp of spirituality to sustain us during a long galut that's expecting us. And that's what the second temple was about. Maybe we won't get into that in detail, but it's potential. Today it's potential also. And what's going to be with it? And I keep on saying out loud, Chevre, we better get it right this time. What do you want to do? You want to go back again for another, one of those big circles? Back again, and you pass go, and then you come around again in 2,000 years? No, thank you. Let's get it right. But to a large extent, it's in our hands. But I'd like to open for comments. I just want to say, summary of what I'm saying is that people's expectations of redemption are very much the simple meaning of the prophecies, are very much Rabbi Yochanan. They're waiting for a great shofar to blow, and then the gathering of the exiles. They're waiting for water to emanate from Jerusalem, and for wolves to stop eating lambs, and ailments being miraculously cured and things like that. And since that's not what we have in Israel, they belittle what we have. And I'm saying if we accept Shmuel's opinion and Maimonides' opinion, that these are parables, and the main difference is that we are independent and we can realize the prophecies by making this nation and this state and this people what it's supposed to be, then I think we will look at the gift of the independent state of Israel in a much more significant and positive perspective.
Right. That's true.
Bevakasha.
The description you have, when the animals lie down with each other and there's no more war and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that, you can liken that to the expression called the end of history, right? That history is stopped, that everything is perfect and everything is good. Well, what does it mean to be that everything is good and that history is really ended? It means that human enterprise, creativity has stopped. Somehow we've reached perfection. And human enterprise is, by definition, imperfect, which means that it has not stopped. It may be getting worse, it may be getting better, but it certainly has not stopped. And so it's unlikely to conceive of the idea that if there's a worldly entity, that it will be perfect. It cannot be.
I thank you so much, because I'm just trying to open on my computer the Rambam Maimonides that I would like to quote in this vein, but I will. It's going to take me a while to look for it. I'm going to stop that now. I'll just answer your question. in the same chapter that we were quoting from, we quoted from Rule 1 and 2, and Rule 3 or 4 or 5 in that chapter, the Rambam explains, Maimonides explains, and he explains it elsewhere in his writings, that the reason why we strive for the Yemot HaMashiach is not so that we will be powerful and we can be the wolf. Finally, we will be the wolf. No, the Rambam says we don't need that. We're not interested in that. By the way, I think we're a very interesting nation in the sense that we've been stepped on so many times that it's pretty, it's a kind of psychological thing that a lot of people who are abusive are people who are abused. Given that, you might expect Am Yisrael to be a very abusive nation, and we're not. Guys, if you want to make peace with us, we'll forget everything. Let's just make peace in the world. So that's a positive thing about Am Yisrael. But in any case, we're not interested in Mashiach, in the days of Mashiach, so that we will be the wolf. We're not interested in the days of Mashiach, says the Rambam, because we'll be very rich. There is a statement in the Talmud of the rabbis, some rabbis, who say that in the time of Mashiach, money and
Good stones, precious stones.
Not precious. The precious stones is in one of the prophets in Yeshayahu, but in the Gemara, there's a statement in the time of Mashiach, beautiful clothes and not money. It doesn't say money. It says beautiful clothes and like cakes and bread will grow on the trees. And the Rambam says, don't expect that to happen. It means that the financial situation will be very good. You'll work a little bit and make a lot of money. And why is that important? What's good about that? We'll all become spoiled. What's good about that is that we will have a lot of time to delve into moral and philosophical and holiness issues and make the world a good world. And that's what Yemot HaMashiach is about, making the world a good place. When I see that, I hear the Rambam saying, even in Yemot HaMashiach, it won't be perfection, but it will be so good that we'll be free, we'll have time and energy and ability to make it even better. So I hear a hint in that statement of Maimonides that maybe he's bothered by your question, and it answers my question about how boring is it going to be in the time of Mashiach. What's left for us to do? In my life today, I have a purpose. If everything is perfect, who needs me? So what am I going to do with myself? So I agree with you in that sense, and I can cling it to that source of the Maimonides to say we will have very broad abilities and opportunities. It will be a good world, and it will be in our hands and in our abilities to keep making it better and better. It's a very lofty dream.
I'll turn the question back. I think we live in the real world, and what Maimonides is saying, what Shmuel seemed to say, is we will always live in the real world. And the parables and all that is wonderful. We should learn from that. But I always remember a different parable that says the Torah lo b'shamayim, that we have to decide what it means here and live according to the laws of the world. So my question, to flip it around, is why does this segment of otherwise very learned, very religious Jews think otherwise? Why do they think that if it's not perfect, it doesn't count?
So first of all, I lean strongly towards agreeing with Maimonides. And I don't know if I'll be right. I will know if I was right or not when it occurs. Until then, I won't know if I was right or not. And one of the reasons why I think that way is because I think that it's much more meaningful. I don't see the meaning if God makes the world perfect through miracles. What was the whole point of our going through everything we went through if he's going to make the world perfect? If the idea of the world was to put it in the hands of human beings, and we will bring it to be a good world, whoa, that's significant. So I think I long much more for that than for miraculous, miraculous godly intervention that makes the world performs all these miracles as described literally. On the other hand, reading in Chabad, in some of Chabad's writings, by the way, this is something I was going to mention. It's a good time to mention it. Something that Chabad says is that God's works are better than man's works. What man does is always limited, is always partial, and is never eternal. When God does it, that's the best. So what we really strive for, we're really hoping and waiting for, is for God to bring redemption, because we're going to do our best. And when we do our best, then God will bring redemption. So Chabad, I can't say all of Chabad because I'm not well versed enough in the different rabbis of Chabad and writings and so on. But at least some of Chabad have this attitude that who's right in the argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel, like a good Jew.
They think Rabbi Yochanan, probably.
Oh, what does the rabbi say to the two people arguing?
You're right and you're right.
Both right. So how does that work? So they say that Shmuel is stage A and Rabbi Yochanan is stage B. One step of redemption, one stage of redemption is very natural in this world, very worldly. Then there's a second stage of redemption, which is the wondrous, literally, which is Rabbi Yochanan, which is literally these wondrous descriptions of the prophets. And it's hard for me, I have to try hard, Michael, to get into their shoes because I lean towards Maimonides. But I think that's the reason why they're saying that, because anything that's human is partial and time limited and so on. And at the end, it has to be God who makes the world perfect, and only that way can it be perfection. So, okay. So we have difference of opinions. We probably, some of us at least, will not be comfortable davening in the same shuls because that leads to other disagreements between us. But we can live in the same town, and we don't have to, be disrespectful or violent towards one another in any of the ways that we see around us today. So we can agree to disagree, and you know what? When it happens, we'll see who was right. So one of us is going to say to the other one, see, I told you so. But then Chabad is going to say, not necessarily. That's only stage one. Maybe there's going to be stage two. I don't know.
But that's what the Torah says about how are we going to know which one is a Nevi Emet when whatever he says happens. So that's how we decide.
Exactly. That's why some Haredi attitudes say about religious Zionism, you can't be right. It didn't happen. But Shmuel and Rambam are saying to them, no, you're wrong. The parable is happening partially, not perfectly, but the parable is happening, and that's what the prophet said. So in order to know who's the true prophet, Tova, it depends whose interpretation you follow. Exactly. So when you are going to say, or someone is going to say that he's not the true prophet, his prophecy didn't happen. The other guy is going to say, yes, it did. It was a parable. So we're going to, like good Jews, we're going to keep on arguing about it.
Well,
that's the custom.
Sounds good.
Right, exactly. By the way, one of the most interesting sources on this issue is Tfilat Amidah, Tfilat Shmona Esrei, because you have the first three brachot, which are praises of God and the covenant with the fathers, and God is using His power to be gracious, and Tchiyat Amitim, and God's holiness, and then man's wisdom, and then repentance, and then again a certain form of Geulah that's not the Geulah, and we ask for health and blessing in Eretz Yisrael and Kibbutz Galuyot, gathering of the exiles, and returning of the judicial system. By the way, understanding from what is happening here in the last few months, I know why we don't have redemption now. Let's say, for instance, Beit HaMikdash, because if we can't argue in a reasonable way about a non-religious judicial system,
Right.
Just think what's going to happen when we will be arguing in the
Yeah.
name of Hashem about a religious judicial system. Oh my God, we can't go anywhere near there for the time being. So it's us. We're doing this to ourselves. Until we can reasonably discuss what is going to be in the time of Mashiach, we can't get there. But in any case, Tfilat Amidah continues, and then it reaches Jerusalem and the house of David, at Tzemach and Mashiach, which is Mashiach. Meaning, what comes first, Mashiach or gathering of the exiles? So in Masechet Megillah, the Talmud says this is the order of redemption. It's a process. It's gradual. There is gathering of the exiles, blessing of plenty, and a good financial situation in Eretz Yisrael, and then returning gradually the judicial system and Jerusalem, and at the end, it's Mashiach. It's much more Rambam realistic, Shmuel realistic, than Rabbi Yochanan supernatural. And this is the tefillah that we say every day, every weekday. And, sometimes you feel like going to somebody who believes otherwise and just said Tfilat Amidah and just bring with you the Gemara and Megillah and say, hey, you just said the other opinion. But again, that's easy for me to say. I'm sure he has his arguments that I'll have a difficulty with. And we have to agree that we disagree, and we'll only know the final answers when it will be the time of redemption.
Okay. Sounds good.
If I can, because we had, we started late because of the technological difficulties at the beginning. If I can, I would like to add something. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sharing screen again. Sorry, this is in Hebrew. I will translate and explain. I'm moving on to Rav Kook. Rav Kook, who passed away in 1935. Who was born in 1865. So when he was a young child, there was already talk about beginning of returning to Eretz Yisrael. There were beginnings of settlements in the 70s and the 1870s, certainly 1880s. When he was already a young man, 1885, 1890s, 25. He's a rabbi. He's already a rabbi in Lithuania. There's, all these kind of beginnings of Zionistic movements. In 1897, he is 32 years old, and Herzl has the convention in Basel and the creation of the Zionist movement. And Rav Kook is supportive of this movement. One of those rabbis who was supportive of this and supportive of cooperating with it and influencing it from within and not being critical of it from the outside and being against it. And he says, and in 1902, the rabbi of Yafo passed away, and Rav Kook is invited to be the rabbi of Yafo. And those times things took more time. It took 2 years. In the month of Iyar, 1904, his airplane landed at the Ben Gurion airport. Actually, his boat landed at Yafo, and he became the rabbi of Yafo, and then later on the chief rabbi of Israel. And he writes, these are things he wrote already when he was in Israel, but it's interesting to see. I just want to point out two sides that you can find within Rav Kook, and that are very. First of all, I love Rav Kook's teachings, but also I think they are, on the one hand, very optimistic, and on the other hand, very realistic. And he says the following. These are two different paragraphs in a compilation of things he wrote about Tchiyah. Tchiyah is like resurrection, not in the sense of Tchiyat HaMitim, in the sense of Am Yisrael returning, being resurrected in Eretz Yisrael as a nation. He says the following in Kaf Zayin. When someone gets stronger spiritually, and a person is strengthened spiritually, it makes stronger the practical contents of life, and makes a person more interested in the world and in life and everything that entails. I would say this is a surprising statement. Very often, a person is spiritually uplifted and is not interested in worldly things. He's interested in God. He's so interested in God that he wants to go live in a monastery so that he can devote all this time to godliness and not be busy with the mundane things in this world. Rav Kook is saying that's only one level. If you go up higher, if you get spiritually stronger, you get connected more than before to the world and life and everything that it entails. I would say because of the belief in one God. Same God created you and created your soul, created human beings and life and everything that it entails. So if you get stronger spiritually, you are interested in human beings, in what's happening in the world, in what bothers people, in what interests people. Very interesting. Says the Rav Kook, only at the time of the destruction, Bizman HaChurban ve'karov lo, when the strength of Am Yisrael, Chayla Yisraeli ne'etat me'admato, when the strength of Am Yisrael was torn away from its land and taken to exile, and when we are in exile, we don't have physical existence as a nation. We don't run a state. We don't have the responsibility of running a state. We don't have the strength of running a state. We are dispersed in Jewish communities and other nations, countries. And the result of that is that we were deemed to realize our goal, להכיר את תעודתו. Our aspirations were only במעמדו הרוחני המופשט, in our, wasn't supposed to happen, only in our spiritual, how do you say mufshat, our spiritual, obscure, what would the word could be, a good word for mufshat? Abstract. Abstract spiritual. Our goals became totally spiritual and abstract, not realistic, because we don't have a realistic national Jewish existence. And therefore, individuals, yechidim, individuals were guided to leave this world for spiritual things, like Christian, what are they called in a monastery? Christian
priests, monks.
Monks and priests, right?
Like
right.
monks in a monastery. And when we are in galut, the world is far away from us, the realistic world, then we seclude ourselves from worldly things for spirituality. And even that brought about, I'm not going to get into the details, a mecha'ah from heaven, a objection from
Protest,
heaven.
objection. Right.
Protest from heaven, thank you. אבל כאשר הגיע התור של בניין האומה בארצה, when it came the time for Am Yisrael to once again be building themselves as a nation in their own land, meaning in my life, says Rav Kook, at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, then the need of practical issues, national, social, you need a judicial system, you need to pave roads, you have to have a financial existence and system, you have to have a health, you have to have your own hospitals, everything that's needed for a society and for a state. He says all of these things have become part of what the nation in general needs to be busy with, has to be responsible for, and they therefore are part of Torah. Meaning in exile, Torah can be about Shabbat and Kashrut and Tzedakah and all kinds of different mitzvot, but not about running a state, because we don't have a state. So Torah became those mitzvot that we can fulfill as individuals, as families, as a community, but not as a nation. And everything, all the worldly things, we drafted very far away from them, became very spiritual. But when we come back to the state of it, to create a state of our own in our own land, all of these issues and topics and needs, all these issues are part of what the nation has to deal with, and that makes them part of Torah. Torah has what to say about how the financial system should be run,
Right.
and how medicine should be handled, all kinds of different things. So it's all part of Torah. So Rav Kook is saying, if you think of strengthening spiritually, the whole state of Israel, with everything that it includes, is all part of Torah. So some people are still in the kind of character of Galut. All they want to do is to sit in yeshiva and study Torah. And it doesn't matter, all these worldly things are mundane and are lesser and unimportant. And, if you go and you have a profession in the state of Israel, well, okay, you're a kosher Jew, but you're not on the highest level, because the highest level is studying Torah. And the Rav Kook is saying, in this age, in this time when we are creating a functioning Jewish state in our land, all of the things that are needed in a modern state are part of Torah. And it is not a lower level, it is part of living the Torah in this world. So this is representative of, again, two very different opinions about the state. So one of the things I want to say about how we deal with this is by being positive, spiritually positive towards everything that goes on, everything that needs to be taken care of in any state, and also in a Jewish state, and trying to connect it to Torah. Torah is not only about those mitzvot that have nothing to do with the state. It's also about everything that goes on in the life of the Jewish nation. So we have to look to the Torah to guide us and to be relevant and have what to say to the life of Israeli citizens in the state of Israel. And that's one way of bringing Torah into the Jewish state. So that's one point. So I'm saying Rav Kook is very interesting, very broad in his thinking, and in a way optimistic that everything that's going on should be and can be part of the Torah. The second paragraph says the following: we have a tradition. Mekubalimanu means we have a Kabbalah, a tradition that we received from previous generations, that there will be a spiritual revolution in Eretz Israel and in Israel and the people of Israel at the time that the nation will be awakened to return to Eretz Israel. We knew in advance. It's not surprising. Don't tell me many people do this. They say, the Torah says there will be tshuva, we will all repent, and then we will return to Eretz Israel. So we haven't all repented. So what's happening now is sweet, but it's not redemption, as we saw in some rabbis that we discussed previously. Rav Kook is saying that's not the only thing that has been said. There is also a tradition that when Am Yisrael returns to Eretz Yisrael, there will be a spiritual revolution. There will be something negative spiritually. Why will this happen? Rav Kook explains that we will be so successful physically, and our situation will be so positive. We'll have a strong Western economy, and people think that we have already reached our goal. Matratam Kura, we have reached our goal, and we don't have, that's it. We have an independent state. It's a strong state. It has a good financial system. The only thing is that that buying an apartment, buying a house is expensive. Once we solve that, we've done everything that we need to do in our state. And Rav Kook says, and that makes the soul small. It weakens the soul.
Lessons, yeah.
It makes our neshama, our soul, very small, because we don't aspire to lofty ideals and holy ideals. And so the spirit dwindles and settles down, and there will be a revolution, and we will see that we need higher goals. And why does this happen, says Rav Kook? Because it's like a pendulum. When we were in Galut, here, 1 second. I'm going to use a pendulum. Here's my pendulum. When we were in Galut, okay? When we were in Galut, the pendulum was on the spiritual side. We didn't have a very significant physical existence. We didn't have to take care of a state. Okay, we come back to the state of Israel, and we have to take care of all physical aspects of life. The pendulum swings to the other side. So we become very interested in in being strong physical individuals, in being a strong physical state, in making sure that Jews are safe. We protect Jews. We must dedicate our shiur tonight Leilui neshama of those of our brothers who were killed, that refuah shlema for those who were injured today. But we want to be very strong. We want to protect the people of Israel. This is very important. We want to have a good financial system and so on and so on. And it's all very physical because the pendulum is swinging in the opposite, towards the opposite extreme after many generations where our only national interest was spiritual. And says Rav Kook, this is a swinging of the pendulum in the opposite direction. These are chevlei Mashiach. Chevlei Mashiach are the pains of the time of Mashiach that in the end will bring a good fragrance, will bring a blessing, good fragrance to the world, because at the end, the pendulum is going to find its balance. So it's up to us not to be extremists on the extreme of the spirituality or at the extreme of the physicality, but to understand that we need to create the proper balance of national, realistic, physical existence with national, spiritual, important existence of values and aspirations. And that is what we have to strive for and work at. And anyone who is working on either or is doing something positive. But they all need to understand that they need the other one as well. No one of us who's focused on spiritual things or focused on physical things can exist here without his or her brothers and sisters who are strengthening the other side of the coin. We need both sides of the coin. So what I'm saying about Rav Kook is how positive he is, how important general values are to him, and on the other hand, he understands that it's not going to be an easy stroll just to bring Geulah. It's going to be a big haul. It's going to have a very difficult spiritual challenges. But at the end, it should bring out what it's supposed to bring out, which is not simplistic, but more complex, but more complete. I rest my case.
So nobody has a corner on the market, huh?
Apparently not. Everyone has a corner of the market, but not a corner on the market.
Okay.
So it strikes me that one of the things that doesn't seem to be talked about too much is not necessarily why is this or is this not redemption, but why is it required in the first place? Why do we have exiles being brought back? Because we were exiled. And why were we exiled? Because we couldn't get along. And yes, there's a lot of spirituality that happened in the interim, and now we're all coming back to the same place. And guess what? We still can't get along.
That's true. That's very true. Okay.
And after that, you have to say something optimistic after that.
We're all here. We are friendly. We talk to each other. We're not yelling. We're very nice.
We are here on the end of a beautiful day, blessed by Hashem. We've got awful people doing awful things to our fellows, and God willing, we'll find the strength to work together and take care of the problem.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
He's done.
I don't want to wade in, you know me, I don't want to wade into politics. You know me, don't want to wade into politics. But I read a lovely little ditty on a talkback, and this fellow said, look, birds fly, right? And airplanes fly. Do you know that an airplane doesn't fly very well if it only uses its right wing, or if it only uses its left wing? It needs to use both wings to fly.
That's right.
And birds.
There was a rabbi. There was a rabbi, Fuhrman, Menachem Fuhrman, passed away 5, 6, 7 years ago from cancer. He was very big on being in creating relationships with Muslim leaders. He wanted to prove that religion is the solution and not the problem, and that the solution will come through religious leadership. a great friend of mine who I want to invite to give us this shiur one evening when we'll deal with non-Jews in the state of Israel. I want to discuss that. I want to invite him to give the shiur. Rav Yaakov Nagen has stepped into these shoes and he's continuing that work today. And Rav Fruman was a fascinating person, very complex. Not, he's not, you can't put him into one box. He's in so many different boxes. And he would always clap. And what he would say about clapping was, that's what clapping is about. Only right, only left, bring them together. That's what clapping is about.
That's good.
So
That's
let's
true.
say, in that vein, let's all clap.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much. Good night.
Laila Tov.
Laila
Laila
tov.
tov. Bye.
Be well, be
Thank